Hello, buddy. Today we have Lily with us. She has turned her personal struggles into something powerful of helping others heal and understand themselves better. Let's get to know a bit more about Lily and the work from her, and then we'll take it from there. Before we begin, I would like to welcome Lily to our channel and thank her very much for taking the time and speaking with us. Thank you so much, Lily, and over to you.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I am a surgeon by training, but I also work as a coach and I work predominantly with surgeons, but also with other high stakes professionals who need to be able to perform in the moment, but also back that up over often many hours at a time, for many days in a row, for many weeks, months, and hopefully years in a long and happy career. So I'm very interested in the physiology and the psychology behind human performance and well-being and health more broadly.
Yeah. So, Lily, please tell us where are you from and what was your childhood like?
So I was born in London, UK, and I grew up when I was very young in South London, and then my family moved to Bristol, which is in the southwest of England. And I had a really happy childhood. I'm one of four. I've got three much older brothers. Um, Parents who both worked. In fact, they're both still working in their 80s, which is pretty amazing. They're both entrepreneurs. And my brothers all run their own businesses in one way or another. Um, I was very lucky to go to excellent schools that were very wide in their emphasis. Academic came into it, but also I did a lot of drama and sport and had lots of different hobbies. And I think that's really shaped my curiosity and breadth of interest today.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at, you can tell that we had a great childhood and a excellent exposure. Looking at you, it's easy to tell, Lily.
Was that?
Looking at you, a person can tell easily that you had a broad exposure in life.
Thank you.
So, what kind of things are parents into? What kind of entrepreneurial activity are they doing? If I may
So
ask.
my mum is a medical artist by training, and she set up a medical simulation company when I was 5. And I think that's really where I first fell in love with bodies because she would watch a lot of videos of keyhole surgery, for example, so that she could make a model out of synthetic materials for doctors and nurses to practice on before they actually started on a patient themselves. So I used to watch as a toddler and a young child these amazingly beautiful anatomical videos. And then mum was always making different body parts out of synthetic materials, at the kitchen table and things. So I was always very interested in that. My dad is a solicitor by background, but then he went into waste tech entrepreneurship. So quite a different field.
So, I guess what your mom was doing, that was the main reason that drew you into medicine, is it? Really?
Well, I don't think so because I actually didn't read medicine as my undergraduate degree. I
Yeah.
never thought I would be a doctor when I left school. I had a
Yeah.
couple of years out, and then I actually had a offer to read English literature, but then decided to do a broader degree in Melbourne, Australia, where I could build a Bachelor of Arts and Sciences up in different modules. And I ended up majoring in anatomy and physiology from there. So I'm not sure I was aiming to be a doctor, but definitely that love of the human body started there, I think, with mum. Yeah.
So, what drew you to plastic surgery, Lily?
Well, as I've mentioned, I've always loved human anatomy and physiology. And I think I went to medical school with a view to being some sort of functional medic, actually, or complementary and alternative practitioner of some sort. And my brother, who's a traditional Chinese doctor, said that life is a lot easier if you have a conventional degree behind something more alternative. So I thought that was good advice. And so I went for conventional medicine first, but then I just fell in love with surgery. And I think the reason I went for surgery is probably anatomy. And also, I've always been very practical. I always made all my own clothes and things growing up, and I've always used my hands a lot. But then the reason I went for plastics within that, I think probably, well, one of the main reasons is its anatomical breadth, because it's really not confined to any area of the body at all. We operate on faces and ears and hands and feet and, all over the trunk and torso. And it's very anatomical in its design. A lot of plastics is about filling in holes that have been left through resecting cancers, for example. And you really have to understand the blood supply to different parts of the body to be able to move tissue around. So I think probably it was a combination of factors, but that was definitely a big selling point for plastics for me.
So when you chose that path, what did you expect it to give you?
I think I don't know how intentional my choices were in retrospect. It was always very compelling, and I think when you're in any sort of career that progresses in a very linear way, like medicine tends to do, I, like many, just looked at the next step. I'm not sure I ever visioned where I wanted to be in 20 years, for example, but surgery is very attractive because it's so exciting. It's also very high status. For someone who is curious and loves lifelong learning, it promises that. In fact, it demands it. And of course, it's a secure job. I mean, it's pretty hard to be unemployed as a doctor, although sadly some people are, but I think on multiple levels ticks a lot of boxes. So I suppose I expected to get a job where I could always find work. I would always be reasonably well remunerated. I could have a choice in how I then practiced as a consultant in terms of, private or public or different subspecialties. And I never really had to explain what I did at a dinner party because everyone knows what a surgeon does. So it's interesting now that I'm doing something a bit different. It takes me significantly longer to explain what I'm doing than when I was full-time surgical professional.
So what surprised you most when you actually started working as a surgeon, if there was anything like this?
What separated me most from others, do you think? Or was that the question?
No, no. What surprised you most when you actually started working as a surgeon? Was there a difference between actual and that image that you created in your mind?
Mm. I think probably how little you operate as a surgeon was
Yeah,
quite surprising. And I think
yeah,
that's true in our current training scheme when you're quite junior.
yeah.
A lot of it is admin, but it's also true for consultants. So in the UK, surgeons actually only operate electively 20% of the time. And that's been also reflected across Europe and various other countries. So it's quite fascinating how little of surgical life really is operating. And the rest of it is, managing clinics, obviously managing emergency work. And there's a huge amount of admin and coordination that goes on outside the job, which I don't think people necessarily think about, design, pay due credence to. But I think that can come at a real cost because some people really struggle with it. And it can become quite burdensome. But it can also, if you can do it well and efficiently, I think it becomes something that can really enhance your surgical technical experience. So it's quite an interesting part of the surgical job that no one talks about, but is very, very present and important.
Yeah. Lily, this is something slightly off topic that I want to discuss to you about. I don't know if you have heard about this in UK, but in India there are these sitcoms or TV serials. What they show in serials is, for example, there will be some characters that are playing a particular show. So what happens? What these people do is that a particular person suddenly does some kind of a plastic surgery and they suddenly start looking like somebody else. Does this, according to you, does this thing happen in the UK, or who was people watching this thing, the viewers watching this thing? What would you like to tell them about this? If you heard about this in the UK?
Not particularly, no. As in, people have plastic surgery in order to look like a specific other person, or when they have plastic surgery, they start to look different to how they did before.
Yeah.
Which one?
Now say, now say for example, today, according
Hmm.
to the series, what they show is that today I'm looking like myself again. So according to this thing, what they show is a comedy, comical, whatever it is called. Today I'm Ajay. Suddenly tomorrow I start looking like Rowan Atkinson. This is what they
I
show.
see. Yeah. It would be quite difficult to make someone look like a specific other person, although I'm sure it
Yeah.
is possible. but I haven't ever worked with a patient whose aim was to look like someone else, so I can't really comment. But it's not something I've come across, I must say.
Yeah, must be like that only. Yeah. So, what has your journey felt like for you? What has the journey as a surgeon felt like for you on a personal level?
Well, I think it's been a journey of two halves, really. It's very satisfying, inspiring, compelling, engrossing, all the things you'd expect, you know. It's a busy job. It demands a massive amount of commitment and, as I've kind of alluded to before, time outside hospital to
Yeah,
keep up to date and to make sure that you're absolutely as learned as you can be around your topic and technically as good as possible. Um, and it can be quite easy to pursue that to the point that it eats into the rest of your life. And surgeons are known for being um, guilty of struggling sometimes with relationships or general foundational health and so on because the job is so demanding. It can be difficult to prioritize your own life or that of those that you love. So I think it's important to be quite intentional about those things. And I didn't really prioritize my health, and then I had a health issue a couple of years into my surgical registrar training. So that I'd been a doctor by then for about 7 years. And though that wasn't the way I would want to gain perspective, it forced me to step back and I had to have a few months off for treatment. And in those months, once the dust had settled, I was able to see surgical life, or at least my surgical life, from the outside almost. And I think that perspective on it has completely shaped what I then chose to do. But it can be quite difficult, like many things, to have that when you're in it, you know?
yeah,
Um, so, yeah, I think at a personal level, it has very much been part of my identity and given me a huge amount of understanding about the world and about people. I think, increasingly in life, we're able to create an echo chamber around ourselves of people that we choose to be with, of content that we choose to consume, or that an algorithm feeds us that agrees with what we think. As faith groups reduce and as family units reduce and as multi-generational communities become less and less the norm now, certainly in the UK, it's very easy to go through life without spending any time with someone that you disagree with but still love or still respect or still have to rub along with. And I think working as a doctor is an immensely privileged position because you see all walks of life at their most vulnerable and the human side of every single person, no matter what their political view or their religious belief or their, any other aspect that you may in other contexts disagree with them on.
yeah.
So I think that has given me a humility and level of compassion and empathy that I may have struggled to find in different jobs. So yeah, I don't think I would be who I am today or where I am today if I hadn't trained as a surgeon.
So, Lily, was there a moment when you started to question how doctors are supported during difficult times?
Yeah, I think there was. When you speak to someone whose perspective is so different to yours, it can really jolt you out of what you've accepted as normal. And so the treatment that I had was for cancer, and I decided that I wanted to have some therapy sessions. I'd never had therapy before because I wanted to make sure that I felt emotionally that I had processed the experience. But at the same time, I thought, well, I could also deal with my performance anxiety, which had become an issue surgically for the couple of years preceding me needing to have treatment, independently of it, but where I developed a tremor sometimes in front of certain people or doing certain procedures because I was really anxious about getting it right. So I thought, I tell you what, I think I can combine those two things. So I spoke to my brother about it. I was asking him what he thought, and he's one of my three brothers. He's a very grounded guy. He works as a carpenter. He lives in Somerset. Um, we get on very well, but he's very different to me in terms of what he has held, front and foremost in his life in many ways. And I was describing it to him, and he said, "What tremor?" And I said, "Well, I get this tremor. It's so annoying, but I can't control it. The more I try, the worse it gets." And no one's been able to give me any advice around it apart from to take beta blockers, which is fine, and I do, but I don't really like being reliant on them. And he said, "Look, I'm not a doctor, but if I was to be reduced to shaking in my life from fear, I basically would have had to have an attack on my life of some kind, or been held at gunpoint, or like jumped and snatched a baby out of the way of an oncoming bus or something. It'd have to be something quite extreme. And if you're experiencing that every day at work, that just can't be good for you." And I just had this moment of seeing it through his eyes, and I thought, yeah, it's so true. It's definitely not good for you, is it, to have that level of stress response? But I had kind of normalized it, and culturally, it has been normalized to some degree, in that you do see it quite a lot around. And so I
Yeah,
think I became aware at that point, in contrast to how I was being looked after during my and after my cancer treatment, where I was so well supported by the NHS, by the occupational health team, by my colleagues, by my seniors. They were amazing. And I really felt like I was so well looked after, both at the time and in my return to work. I don't think we're very good at supporting people in wanting to be the best version of them or to optimize their performance. I think there's a bit of a difference and a shortfall that we could step into. And that's really what a lot of my work at the moment is about, trying to understand and trying to look at other professional groups like the military or like sport or
yeah.
the dramatic arts, and understand how, as an individual, can you be supported to really bring your best to your performance, but also, to your life more broadly.
So in your experience, how do doctors usually respond when they are under pressure? Really?
Well, I think everyone responds in the way that they have been trained or trained themselves to do so. Doctors tend to be good under pressure. I think as a professional group, we like stress, and we tend to like, certainly the doctors who put themselves in high pressure situations, like, you know, trauma A&E, or GP can be very high pressure because it's high turnover, or surgical specialties where there are big cases, trauma, that sort of thing, tend to be drawn towards the excitement of it. Um, so I don't think that doctors don't like pressure. There are a lot of pressures, though, that are more insidious, that come from resource constraints and interruptions and complaints and, you know, all sorts of issues outside work, and trying to juggle those, that I think can really eat away at people's experience. Um, so I guess some doctors under pressure step into it and, have learned to manage it and thrive on that. I think in my experience, they're probably not the majority, but some doctors just work harder because that's what they've always done when they feel like they're under the pump. Um, Either work more or strive for even more perfection, which can become very tiring, of course, and lead to burnout, particularly with maladaptive perfectionism is linked with burnout because you just try harder and harder and harder. Some people can become avoidant of situations, or, you know, maybe people that they find very stressful to be around. And I'm sure we're all guilty of that in life to some degree. I think it's a very individual thing, and the doctors hold patient care at the absolute front and center of what they do. So that will always be the priority. But I think we all develop our patterns when we're feeling under pressure, in order to be able to continue to prioritize patients. And sometimes it's our own downtime that's the first thing to go, which does, I think, have knock-ons in terms of the quality of care and performance that we can sustain. So yeah, I think it really differs depending on the individual.
Oh, Lily, when and how did coaching enter your life, and what changed for you because of it?
So I actually investigated coaching not because I wanted to study executive or performance or leadership coaching, but actually because a colleague and I were really interested in how you could bring the concepts from sports coaching to surgeons. If you compare the two, if you compare playing tennis, for instance, to learning surgery, the way that we tend to learn is pretty much playing matches back to back, and not always even with someone in our players box to give us feedback. In contrast to tennis, where you might have skill drills around footwork or grip, or your serve might be taken apart and put back together again. So we were really interested to understand how we could use those principles to optimize surgeons' technique. And then I signed up for a coaching course that in fact wasn't that, but it was with Coactive, the Coactive Training Institute, um, which was much more of a life coaching, executive coaching style course. And I loved it. And I thought, gosh, actually, I can see how this could really help surgeons and other, people more broadly. But I think individual leadership and self-awareness and self-management strategies aren't really given much time, and we're not supported, broadly speaking, in developing those. So that's why I then continued that training. But of course, just like if you're training to be a therapist, you have to have therapy. If you're training as a coach, you have to have coaching. And so I received a lot of personal coaching during that time, and that really helped me learn about myself in many ways that have deeply changed how I view myself in the world and what I feel I can contribute, and has irrevocably altered my path as a result. So I'm really grateful for that lucky mistake.
Yeah. So, Lily, how has your understanding of performance and well-being changed over time?
I think it's become much broader. When you think about performance, you often think about that moment on the stage or in the operating theatre. But actually, the person behind that performance is so important and needs to be cherished and nurtured as much as the technical performance side, in order for that healthy balance and tension to continue over time. I think that's one awareness that I've developed. And the other, I think, is that pressure and stress are a composite. So you think of it as, a single amount of pressure or stress, but there are multiple parts, multiple levels that pile on top of each other to take you up to your stress threshold, or to narrow or widen your window of tolerance. And I think we kind of intuitively know that, don't we? We talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, or we talk about how when we're tired, we become really ratty. It takes much less to push us over the edge, like make us snap at our children or make us
Yeah.
feel really anxious about something. But when you actually look at that with a critical eye and break it down into the different components, it becomes quite interesting to consider how you can mitigate your concept of stress by addressing each one in turn. So for instance, there is the stressor itself, whatever that is. And even, as a perfectly rested human with a perfect life in a perfect system, there's no doubt that surgery would always be stressful because of its inherent nature. So there's the stressor. But then there are the other physiological stresses like being tired or hungry or thirsty or needing a wee or having back pain or having just argued with your partner or not finding a car park or reading a complaint email, all those things. And you can design a lot of systems in your life so that they become much less likely to contribute. Then there's your self-talk, self-criticism, which is inherently stressful in comparison with self-compassion. And there are lots of ways to develop compassionate ways of viewing yourself. And then there's your belief about stress itself. So if you think stress is a bad thing and you get really anxious about being anxious, then that in and of itself is a stressor, that anticipatory anxiety. So just believing that stress is actually good for performance, and we can make sure we punctuate it so that it doesn't chronically just erode into our resources, but lean into it as a concept, that can be helpful. All these different things that you can do so that your performance can really be optimal and you can manage your physiological state and your focus in order to be able to deliver your best in that moment.
So, what has your experience taught you about handling pressure, Lily?
Well, I think that really, all of those components that you can deal with them separately and you can then have a lot more flex so that you can increase your stress levels if you want to in order to increase your focus if you need to. But you can also regulate yourself. You know what takes you from feeling super pressured back to being much calmer and regulated. And I think the other thing is that the often most pressure, most stress actually comes from ourselves. So we interpret it from the world. I should be like that. I should be earning that. I should have achieved that. They think that. Actually, most of it is just what we think that we're sort of reflecting off other people. And I really do. There's a lot of criticism for what I do because people say, but it's just another thing that you're laying at the feet of already really busy doctors. No longer is it the system or the team's fault that it's stressful at work. Suddenly it's their individual responsibility. It's their problem to manage their own stress. And if they don't develop resilience, it's their fault and it exonerates those systems and teams and institutions. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think that the context in which we work, the teams, the comms we have, our psychological safety, all of that is so important. And I think there's a huge amount we can do as individuals in order to understand ourselves, in order to be able to develop the self-compassion I mentioned earlier, in order to know what we need to ask for. Every individual person likes different amounts of stress and pressure, is pushed into stress by different things to each other, and can regulate themselves with different things to each other. And just knowing all of those things about ourselves is so empowering. And I think allow us to be compassionate to others. And I don't know if you've come across Kristen Neff's work, who's an American professor of psychology, but she's studied compassion extensively and revealed that not only is self-compassion much more supportive to high performance and growth than self-criticism, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of surgeons or professional athletes think. They think they have to flog themselves in order to achieve what they do. But also that the people who are most self-compassionate tend to be most compassionate to others too. And the converse is also true. If you're very, very tough on yourself, you're also often very tough on others, and that impacts their performance. So I think it's really critical to get to know yourself and extremely empowering, and also makes life a much nicer place to be, and can really enhance well-being, health, and performance in the immediate and the long term.
So, Lily, I happen to notice on your social media profile that you have been experimenting with AI. So, according to Lily, does she find AI helpful, overwhelming, or is it something in between?
I think AI is amazing, but I definitely view it as a tool and not a replacement. I think I often talk about productivity principles and the Eisenhower matrix, which is such a useful model for understanding what to prioritize. So, for those of your listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically a 2 by 2 grid that was popularized by Stephen Covey, but is based on Dwight Eisenhower saying uh, that there are two things in my life, urgent and important. The urgent are almost never important, the important are almost never urgent, or something like that. I've probably misquoted it, but it's that kind of idea. And essentially, you create important, urgent, not important, not urgent, and it gives you 4 squares in the 2 by 2. And arguably, what you as a person need to focus your time on and your energy is the important, not urgent tasks. Because as humans, we will always prioritize urgent things. There's a psychological effect called the mere urgency effect, which states that if something urgent comes, if someone has a cardiac arrest in front of you, you will always attend to them because it's urgent and it's important in this case. But likewise, if you've got something that urgently needs doing on your to-do list, even if it's not very important at all, you'll tend to do it first before something that's important to you that doesn't have a deadline, like working on your fitness or working on your book or learning to play the guitar or whatever the thing is that's quite difficult to prioritize. It's also important, of course, to do the important urgent things, but you kind of don't need to worry about them because, like the cardiac arrest, you will always attend to them because of the mere urgency effect. So you really need to focus your energy on the top right quadrant of this 2 by 2 to schedule what is important and not urgent. But then it leaves the bottom row. So, what do you do with the urgent, not important things that do need to be done by someone or something, but not by you? It doesn't really need your skill set. And what do you do with the not important, not urgent things that really you just want to completely delete? And I think AI has a really powerful potential role in the urgent, not important quadrant because it can do things for you that you don't need to do
Yes.
and therefore free you up to do the things that are important, that it's you that does them. So I think if you, that's my experience. I'm not a tech expert, but I believe that humans are different to AI. I think that the way that we create, we interrelate, our empathy, we can't, well, at least not yet, be replaced by a machine. Humans
Yes.
are inherently social and we need social interaction to feel safe and regulated. And what that looks like is different. Some people just want a very close group of really tight friends. Other people have massive social networks, but everyone has some form of connection in their life. And and so I think leveraging AI to free you up is a brilliant thing. I think we need to be careful with it. I'm not sure that we fully understand it yet, and we all know it hallucinates. There are certain issues with it that need to be mitigated. But yeah, I think it's amazing, and I'm finding it very useful to help me shift the bottom as someone who doesn't have an executive assistant and I don't have a big team. It's really helping me shift that urgent, not important quadrant. Yeah.
So, Lily, is there something that you would like to tell your younger self in short?
I think that you are enough as you are. I think so many of us are chasing, it's natural, but we're constantly chasing this sense of needing to be more, needing to do more, needing to have more, um, which can be motivating. It's not, I don't think extrinsic drives are a bad thing at all. We'll never get rid of them anyway. But I do think we're, particularly at the moment with so much social media and such a massive wealth divide, um, between different people in the world, it's very easy to constantly live in that state. And I think it's important to know that you are, we all are enough and deserve unconditional goodwill from others and from ourselves. Um, and that can be a very helpful thing. I tell myself often, if I wake up at 3 in the morning when our brains are completely deregulated and our limbic systems and emotional selves are really running the show, it's quite hard to be rational. I'll often say to myself, you are enough. You are safe. There is nothing you need to do because we naturally will always tend to think there is, which has protected us evolutionarily, but does not make us feel secure and happy and well. So, yeah, I think that would be the message.
Great, that's great. That's superb, Lily. Really, thank you so much for sharing all this valuable knowledge and information with us. We wish you continuous success in all aspects of your life. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this video and have a good day. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, Lily.
Thank you so much for having me.